There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Bryan.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, 27-year veteran of the NYPD. And tonight we have a pretty interesting show. You know, despite the gag order in the Bryan Kohberger, Idaho quadruple murder case, of course, with Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Goncalves, and Madison Mogan, we don't like to keep them as anonymous individuals. They're the real victims of this case. Despite the gag order, new information keeps coming out. It's seemingly from unnamed sources who are leaking information to certain broadcast stations. And one of the interesting things that recently came out, and it's from Dan Abrams, who I have a lot of respect for. I think he's a hell of a good reporter and a fair reporter. Someone a criminologist is saying that he believes that Bryan Kohberger planted the sheath for the K-bar knife and purposely left it on the bed where Madison Mogan and Kaylee Goncalves were found slaughtered to death. And we're going to listen to that video. And many people, even when I discuss this case and we talk about the evidence, many people want to believe that Bryan Kohberger is this, you know, this man. Well, he is a mass murderer based on killing 4 people at once, if in fact he did it. And again, we always have to say he's innocent until proven guilty. But he's like this mastermind of murder. And if there is a mastermind of murder, I've never met him or her in my police career. And we're going to discuss some of the mistakes, the big mistakes, if you want to believe he's a mastermind of murder, that he made that were really elementary, and also things that you cannot prevent if you kill someone with a knife, and in this case, kill 4 different people. So I religiously read almost all of the chat on my site, and I see a lot of you folks really do believe that, you know, potentially, like this criminologist, he could have planted this sheath and did it to throw the police off. That's a hell of a lot to expect someone. And we're going to get more into it, what killing 4 people with a knife would have done to him physically, besides emotionally. So, and we'll go over that, whether or not that's a possibility or whether we think that's true, whether he purposefully left that knife sheath there. And with me tonight, I'm glad I'm not running solo tonight. I have retired NYPD Sergeant, and I tricked you a little bit. He was on in the window earlier. Retired NYPD Sergeant and Professor of Criminal Justice at Albertus Magnus College in New Haven, Connecticut. And with me tonight is Mike Geary. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Billy, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, Mike. I would like you to just comment a bit, and then we'll get to the video on it, on whether you believe that Bryan Kohberger purposefully left the sheath there to throw off the investigation.
Yeah, my opinion, definitely not. Absolutely not. Under any circumstances, if he was that bright a killer, like the kind of killer you might read about in a novel, a real mastermind, genius IQ. No, he was none of those things. He was a rookie at killing. It was his first, hopefully it was his first and only homicide he ever committed. But he made so many mistakes. And the idea that he purposely did this to throw off the authorities, perhaps the idea would be that he would throw it off the authorities and think that maybe someone from the Marines did it because the K-bar sheath had the Marine Corps Eagle, Globe, and Anchor on it. No, absolutely not. Under any circumstances do I think he did this purposely. This was accidental, and he just forgot about it because of the killing and everything that was going on, hearing other noise in the home. He was a busy, violent person, blood pumping, adrenaline pumping, and that was an oversight.
100%. I'm going to get to the video because we got a lot we can discuss about it. This is Dan Abrams. I believe it was last night.
A new theory surfaced this week in the case of the Idaho student murders that I find incredibly interesting. It's about probably the single most important piece of evidence in the case: a knife sheath discovered at the crime scene, which allegedly has suspect Bryan Kohberger's DNA on it. The theory is one I just hadn't even considered, that might have been intentionally left there by Kohberger to throw off investigators. The knife sheath looked like this, both with USMC imprinted on it, along with the U.S. Marine Corps Eagle Globe and Anchor insignia. This theory comes from a number of people, but most recently from criminal profiler John Kelly. And it goes like this: that Kohberger left the sheath on purpose, and that the military references were no accident, that they were a ploy to send investigators on a hunt for someone else, someone in the military perhaps, someone other than Kohberger. To further this claim, Kelly calls this staging 101, perhaps a ruse learned from Kohberger's doctoral studies in criminal justice. Kelly claims a normal reaction for someone who had just used a knife would be to return it to its sheath, and the DNA found may have just been an oversight. It's a theory also suggested by British criminology professor David Wilson.
That seems to be a remarkably clumsy move.
Or a remarkably clever move. Because one of the things that's really struck me about the person that's been arrested and accused of this is he is intelligent and high functioning. So would a highly skilled, intelligent student who was teaching criminology, a PhD student, have made such a basic error?
Well, look, the guy was clearly not the...
You know, Mike, one of the things that I can't, when I hear this, I want to think if he was that smart, he would have had the sheath attached to his belt. So the possibility of leaving it there would not have existed, you know? And you know, like I know, I've carried a gun for over 30 years. And I would never carry my gun unless it's attached to my belt, because then you know it's not going anywhere. And if you ever take your gun out, you know that you could put it right back into the holster. The same thing with this knife. If it was attached to his belt, there would have been no possibility to leave it there.
That's right. That's right. And the criminologist really gives Bryan Kohberger too much credit. He says he's highly skilled. He's not highly skilled. He's a graduate student in a graduate course teaching. He's a teacher's assistant. He's learning about criminal theory, about mass murderers and narcissism and psychopaths and sociopathy and things like that. He's not learning how to commit a homicide and avoid getting arrested, 101. They're giving him way too much credit. Yeah.
When the criminologist raises the word staging, now we all know what staging is. I'll just explain it to the audience. A lot of times a crime scene will be staged if someone's going to commit a murder and they want to try to make it look like a suicide. And they'll try to put it in place so it looks like maybe put the gun in the decedent's hand, that type of thing. Or another way is to stage a robbery to make it look like there was a forced entry. Can you think of a couple more, Mike, staging possibilities?
Yeah. If you strangled someone to death, and then what you do is you take a piece of rope, put it around their neck, and attach it to a pipe or something like that. That sort of thing. You make it look like a burglary. Somebody's breaking in. If you poison them, and with some sort of narcotics, you might somehow, if you can, fake a suicide note. Things like that, and throw people off by using their cell phones to text message people to throw off the time of death so that it looks like it didn't happen when it did. There's a million different variations. You've seen a lot more of that than I have.
But in the same vein, Mike, that one item does not make a staging.
No.
In my mind.
No.
Leaving a knife sheath does not equal a staging. if you're going to try to stage, you're going to do numerous things, multiple things to try to make it look like something other than what it is. So again, leaving a knife sheath, I believe this was a huge mistake, and based on the fact that he was in a frenzy. He killed 2 people, and the knife sheath he left there wasn't in his mind, and then he went downstairs and killed 2 more people.
And then he got the hell out of there.
Exactly. Right? He got the hell out of. He wasn't even thinking about that sheath. No. So I don't. Let's continue with this, and I just don't really get it that this criminologist is raising this specter here.
The brightest criminal, we know that. But according to the criminal affidavit, the tan leather knife sheath was discovered laying on the bed next to Madison Mogen's right side. The Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA left on the button snap. The knife itself is missing. And with Kohberger said to be an obsessive compulsive with other things like food, one imagines cleanliness in general, it's likely he hid the knife somewhere else after committing the murders, someplace where the blood wouldn't contaminate his clothes. They linked the knife to Kohberger through the DNA recovered from trash at his family's home in Pennsylvania. So let's talk this through with Jesse Weber, anchor and host on the Law and Crime Network, who has been...
I think he means they linked the sheath because they never found the knife. He made a little bit of a blurb there. But so they linked the sheath based through the DNA.
Closely following the story. Jesse, what do you make of the theory?
I think it makes no sense. All due respect, no sense. And I'll explain why. First of all, this K-bar USMC knife, I can go on...
Mike, we finally have someone from TV that agrees with us, or that we agree with them, because usually we're on the opposite specter of what they're saying. They're going right for it. And that's why I like Dan Abrams, and I like this guy too. And not just, I've heard him say other stuff on the Law and Crime Network that I didn't totally agree with. But I think on this, they're right on. And I know a lot of folks in the chat, they want to believe that he planted this knife sheath. Mm-hmm. And again, you can believe whatever you want, but we're just putting our 2 cents in. Yeah. Our 2 New York cents.
Yeah. It's okay.
Amazon right now. I can go on kbar.com right now. I could buy it. This is not something that is exclusive to the military. And without any other evidence left there pointing to a member of the military, it makes no sense that he would think, or whoever the suspect is, that the police would immediately think military. And top of all this, the biggest point, I'm going to take the risk of leaving a piece of evidence that might have my DNA on it, and we all saw that it possibly does, with the idea of maybe the police are going to look at somebody else. It makes absolutely no sense. And if this really was the motivation, one of the dumbest things I've ever thought.
Well, yeah, and we know that he made other mistakes, but the argument goes that he thought he had cleaned the sheath. He thought he had sort of left a pristine piece of evidence, but he missed the sort of the snap, right? He missed that one spot where his DNA was located.
No, what this seems to me is any case I've covered where someone has left evidence at a crime scene, it's a slip up. It's a mistake. So people might say, oh, he's so intelligent. How did he not plan for this? If we have no indication Bryan Kohberger ever did anything like this before, when someone is in the heat of a crime, they're not thinking logically. They could have been in a panic. They could have been afraid. We know that one of the surviving roommates said that the suspect walked right past her. A lot of people have been wondering why. If you are in a state of shock after committing this crime, you can't explain everything why they do something or not do something.
And to support your point, which is pretty persuasive, I'm really getting tired of people talking about how smart this guy is, right? As if he was like the ultimate criminal mastermind who would never have. I mean, he made so many mistakes and so many slip-ups. This idea that, no way he would ever, right? I mean,
they're giving him too much credit. And can we also just address the idea of, well, he's a criminology student, right? So I've taken criminology before. I've spoken to criminologists about this. They don't teach you how to commit the perfect crime. They teach you how to understand why crimes are committed.
Jesse Weber.
Interesting, right? And Mike, I think we feel the same way about this, that again, people are saying giving him too much credit. He's a PhD student. That does not make him a mastermind in crime. Look, police officers, I don't know, I'll try to make this parallel, but they train with firearms, and probably not enough. They go twice a year to shoot. But the things that you learn at the firearms range are ingrained in your brain so that when something horrific happens, you can just go back to that mind, the portion and the training, the repetition of the training, and pull it out of your brain. And hopefully you'll respond correctly when you get into a deadly physical force situation. This is a killer who decided to kill 4 people with a knife. He has no training in it. So it's all on the spot that he's going to do these things. So to think that he's thinking 10 steps ahead is, to me, ridiculous. And we're going to go over, Mike, just some of the many mistakes he made. And I'll start and we can jump to you. Big mistake. He drives right up to the house and he's caught on the camera. His car's caught on the camera 3 times and parks behind the house.
Right.
Is that a mastermind?
No.
Okay, Mike, you're next. See if you can beat that one.
He brings his cell phone with him. And I'm sorry, he turns his cell phone off when he's leaving in Washington in his car, and turns it back on the moment he returns, because we have we know exactly when he turned it on, we turned it off, and we have the cameras from Washington State University. So we got him coming and going there. That's 2. Easy. That's 2. You know.
You don't have any more? That's all you have?
Oh, okay.
Keep going, Mike.
Okay. Well, you know, he leaves like the sheath. That's huge.
That's a huge one.
Leaves the DNA, which means he doesn't have gloves on. All right. He leaves a footprint, a bloody footprint there as he's leaving. He leaves a live witness that he walked right past, you know. There's blood on the, and you can see it in the video of the crime scene. He leaves blood on the going on the door in the back. He does that. You know, I mean, that's only just a few right there.
And there's plenty more. How about on the drive home to Pennsylvania, or at his house in Pennsylvania, he starts washing his car at 4 o'clock in the morning under the eyes of the FBI, who has him under surveillance.
Right.
And he also takes his garbage from his house in Pennsylvania and throws it into the garbage pails of his neighbors. Is this the actions of a master criminal?
No. And then also, if you go back just a little bit before he left for the Christmas break with his father, he didn't clean up the car, or think he did it sufficiently enough in Washington, like the next day or 2 days later, within a couple of days. There's actually some partial evidence that they were recovered, including hair samples off of his carpet. They looked at his his vacuum cleaner bag, all these little things that a person, you know, who's not a mastermind wouldn't think of. I mentioned to my kids, I was talking to them about this today, and I said, look, if Albert Einstein, one of the most brilliant people in the world, E = MC squared, if he decided to kill someone, he wouldn't be good at it. He would make a million mistakes. It's not about your IQ. It's about, you know, IQ level. It's about your experience. He had very little to zero experience doing this sort of thing. Driving around, one of the funniest things was that he was caught on camera like 3 times, had to make a 3-point U-turn. He couldn't park his car. It's kind of like pathetic in a way. He had no idea how to get in and how to get out, even before you commit the crime. Just to get in, the egress and ingress, you know, he messed that up. It's just remarkable.
You know, Mike, that reminds me also when you talk about the car, how about the 12 times he was caught reconning the location? And I've heard people trying to make light of that, or say, oh, he's allowed to drive by their house. He lives 15 or 20 minutes away. How was it that he drove by that house 12 times? I think an attorney would have a hard time convincing anyone that, oh, yes, he was just admiring the neighborhood, you know?
Yeah, sure. Does he know anybody in that neighborhood? Is anybody going to vouch for him? Remember, too, he drove by the apartment, the house, at like 9 a.m., about 4 or 5 hours after he committed the homicide. What's he doing back there at like 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning? Who's he visiting at 9 a.m.?
You know, Mike, that's such a great point, is that, you know, it's common, mostly with serial killers, to revisit the murder scene. Other murderers too. I've seen it where in Manhattan, there's shootings on the street, homicides on the street, where the perp is in the crowd admiring his handiwork, you know, and you would never think like, and that's why I used to make a habit of photographing the crowd for multiple reasons. One of them was that the perpetrator could be in the crowd. And number two was that when you did a canvas later on and people's names came up, and if they said, oh, I was in New Jersey, oh, I was in Brooklyn, and you say, oh, really? This is you 10 minutes after the crime in the crowd there. And they'd be like, oh, man.
You're standing behind the yellow tape. Don't you remember?
Right. That's you behind the yellow tape there, you know, with your buddies. So, you know, there was some little investigative techniques. But I just want to point out also to a lot of folks, and I'm not trying to, when you follow true crime, you follow real crime, you have a right to your opinion. You can think whatever you want. And I encourage you to do so. I'm just saying in this case also, we don't know the rest. And I'm sure there are tons more evidence in this case that we don't know about. I always point back to the autopsy. Have we ever been told the results of the autopsy yet? No. We have not. If there is DNA underneath the fingernails of anyone that was murdered in this case, I think case closed. I don't think you can explain that away whatsoever. How do you do that?
Blood smeared on one of the bodies, his blood smeared on the sheets. You know, you don't explain that away. You can explain a hair follicle away, saying I was there at a party a month earlier, you know, big deal. How do you explain DNA under the victim's fingernails, your blood on the sheets? You know, no. You can try explaining it away, but nobody's going to buy that. You know, not at all.
No, absolutely. And you know, again, if his blood is in that crime scene, commingled with the blood of the victims, I think it's game over also. But you know something, I say in the today, I said in the chat, there was quite a few people in the chat today not believing the system, and there's a mistrust of the police on a national level these days, you know, that people don't trust the police. And you know, that's fine if you don't want to trust
deal with that. Sure, as a prosecutor,
right? And the police, right? And the prosecutors have to deal with that. Absolutely. Southwest 4x4 Explorers, thanks for the 199 super chat. What is your thought, Ree? Was there anyone else? I do not think there was anyone else. I think he acted alone. This has the all the earmarkings of a single person doing this. The evidence points to a single person. Look, early on in this investigation, and we're going to get into more things in regards to this investigation. Remember, right, day one or day two, they were like, this was targeted and personal. That was the day after. That was said by the mayor of Moscow. And we were like, where the hell did he get that from? How did they know that? And then they had to pull it back the next few days. But one of the things I wanted to say, because specifically Ashley Banfield, is getting information from someone, some mole inside the investigation, or moles, maybe even as many as 3 moles, giving us her information, and she's calling that person or persons someone close to the investigation that's giving her information. So can we really vet that information? It's not coming from the police. It's not coming from the district attorney's office, but some of the very rumors that came out early on in this investigation turned out to be true. They turned out to be true. So someone, and maybe multiple people in this investigation, are talking to maybe their friends in law enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
Who's the leak? I wouldn't want to be the person who's the leak that gets caught, because you're going to have handcuffs put on you, you know? And this is serious. There should not be leaks like this. Obviously, someone that knows is definitely leaking. Mike, your opinion?
Yeah, Ashley Banfield, I mean, we've been critical for some of the things she's done, but she's done some really excellent reporting. She's been very accurate. So her sources are probably, you know, definitely bona fide sources, and she knows what she's talking about. And just think, how many homicides have you handled, have you supervised, you've helped in, as from just being from a uniformed patrol officer to uniformed sergeant like I was, and you're sitting there and there's emergency medical technicians. There's crime scene photographers. Depending on what crime it is, there could be ballistics people. There's blood spatter pattern evidence. There's fingerprint people. There's all kinds of people who have some part, play a little bit of part each in the whole entire, getting the whole entire case folder ready for presentation to a prosecutor, and maybe moving on to the grand jury. It's not just the arresting officer. It's not just the squad. It's not just Manhattan North. Like in your instance, there's many people, from clerks, typists, morgue people, medical examiner people. Everybody's got a piece of the evidence that they could possibly leak to someone. And so, yeah, there's no way that you can button up an investigation from day one. I find it remarkable that there has been so little given out, information leaking out, and I'm happy about that. But there's no way that you can go have an investigation from start to finish and not have a single leak. No way.
No, you're 100% right. Schmitty, thanks for the $5 super chat. Another source to NN said the girls had a Bluetooth speaker. Why is this stuff coming out and the sources unnamed? Because the sources, if they're named, they can get arrested for violating the court order, for contempt of court. So I appreciate what you're saying. You're right. Why is this stuff coming out? And who is giving this information to News Nation? Very important, and this stuff could turn out to be extremely important evidence down the road.
Right.
Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime stories from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. We try not to be sensational. We try to give you the facts. We critique what we hear from the news media using our experience and knowledge as both police, detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, academics. Professor Mike Geary is obviously, he's got a law degree and he's an academic. I taught college for 10 and a half years. I also taught at the NYPD criminal investigation course for about 6 or 7 years. So we basically know what we're talking about, I think, And so if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up and ring that bell. Share us with your friends, your family. Talk to your friends about us. Bring them on board the Police Off the Cuff family. We also have a Patreon with 3 different levels if you want to support us financially. And we have a YouTube channel memberships with, count them, 5 different levels. And you can also support us on that. The folks in our chat with the green font, they're part of our YouTube channel membership family. And we really appreciate our subscribers, our fans, our friends. We like all of that. We love our fans. And anyway, Mike, what I'm going to go to next is Banfield talks about last night the contamination of the crime scene. And obviously, this case from minute one, well, not minute one, from once the police became involved, it was videotaped from the outside. So everyone going in and out of that building was on tape, whether it was television or the district attorney's office. They were videotaping to see how many people were going in and out of that crime scene. We've spoke about numerous times, and Mike, you're probably more qualified to talk about this than even me, but Locard, Dr. Edmund Locard's principle of exchange, and that has to do with evidence and the cross-contamination of evidence. And the I'm not going to call it a theory because Ed Wallace would kill me, the principle of
right.
exchange, how that if you're a human being and you go into a crime scene, you bring something from your body or from your clothing, and you deposit that into that crime scene. And at the same time, when you leave that crime scene, you're taking something from that crime scene and bringing it out with you. And that's why law enforcement is supposed to be wearing something called PPE, and it stands for personal protection equipment. And part of that is usually a Tyvek suit, which protects your clothing from pathogens, from blood, from all kinds of diseases. Supposed to be wearing booties on your shoes, so God forbid you don't bring home blood and diseases to your family. And then when you're done processing that crime scene, those things are supposed to be thrown out in a container that cannot possibly contaminate any of the evidence. But having said that, when officers respond to a crime scene, the number one cardinal rule is in this homicide scene is the protection of life. So the crime scene has to be basically sacrificed for the purpose of saving someone's life or potentially seeing if there's anyone alive. Part two of that is to secure that scene in a way that is the perpetrator on the scene? Is the scene safe? Is there any family members on the scene? So that is part two. And three, of course, is to protect the integrity of that crime scene. So there's two things that come before the integrity of the crime scene: the protection of life and the securing of that scene to make it safe. And then part three is, of course, the integrity of the crime scene. Mike, thoughts?
Yeah. You know, from years on patrol, same thing with me. You get these 911 calls, persons, especially like you're out on the street, person stabbed or shot out in the street. It's filthy from the first second you get there. If the person, you don't know, you're not a doctor, I don't make the call. I have to see if that person's alive. Even if they're shot in the head and they look like they're going out, I have to go there. I am absolutely going to have my footprint from my shoe somewhere on that crime scene later on when the detectives come and they start to do their investigation, because I'm just there preliminarily as a patrol officer or patrol sergeant. It's my 911 call. I have to handle it. So there's absolutely going to be some little bit of contamination. This happens outdoors, it happens indoors, and in this case, it was all indoors. But the call came over as a person who was like unconscious, and when the cops went there, I'm sure they absolutely walked through that house, of course, and they had to check out each and every person to see if they were alive. Of course, there's going to be a tiny little bit of contamination. Is that going to change the DNA that is collected? No. Is that going to change the fingerprints that are connected? No. Except maybe if an officer says, I put my hands on a particular spot to kneel down to see if the person was still breathing, that sort of thing. But there's not going to be irretrievable contamination to the point where it is contaminating blood evidence, it's contaminating DNA evidence, it's contaminating blood spatter pattern evidence, things like that. People like to think that if the police make one mistake, that it's going to destroy all the evidence, and no, that never happens. That never happens. And I remember when we were in the academy, and I remember Billy, too, in the academy, they always told you when you get there. And if you get there and the detectives are there taking pictures, make sure your hands are in your pockets so that nobody can accuse you of touching things unnecessarily. But The fact is, you have to touch the victim. You have to investigate to see if they are still possibly breathing. You have to go around and see if there's anybody else. What happens if someone is in a home or some sort of large apartment and they're dying? You don't know if the perpetrator's still on the scene. Your life may be in danger. There's all kinds of dynamics that are going on. It's not like you see on like say, I always talk about the Agatha Christie kind of thing where this is pristine crime scene and the person's lying there and the Scotland Yard detectives there. No, that's not the way this stuff happens. And yeah, the crime scenes are a very busy place. But the very first response is not with the Tyvek suits and the personal protection equipment. It's the patrol cops, the patrol sergeant going there, and they have to go through that crime scene. And there's no problem with that whatsoever in 99.9% of the cases.
Exactly, Mike. Very well said. Lou Lemoracco, great question. Bill, the question he asked when arrested, anyone else arrested, is it in the same vein as the sheath? Get it? Intentional? This is connected to behavior. You know something, Lou? I agree with you. I think he did say that to throw off the investigation. Or is there a small possibility that someone helped him get rid of the bloody clothing or something like that, or someone even unintentionally didn't know what they were doing and helped him do something? But Lou, I think I would more or less agree with you that statement probably was said to throw off the investigation. And one thing people have asked me, after he said this, the police, of course, would have tried to say, we'd like to talk to you, but first we're going to have to read your Miranda. You have the right to remain silent, all that stuff. And he invoked counsel immediately. So many people in the chat don't understand that. Once he invokes counsel, it's over. There's no more questioning. The law enforcement's done. They cannot question him anymore. And people keep asking, oh, why didn't they keep trying to question him? Because they're not allowed to. That's it. He invoked counsel. It's the end of the question. But Lou, thank you very much. That's a great, great, great point.
Good one.
You know, now I'm going to play a little bit of Banfield, and she talks about the contamination of the crime scene. She actually does a pretty good job here. Let's play some of this.
If you've ever been at a crime scene early in the situation, it can be a little frantic. It can be a little chaotic. Mm-hmm. And there can be survivors, people who are injured, people who need saving. There can also be bad guys still lurking either in the crime scene or around the crime scene. And for that reason, there are priorities. Right? Priority is we got to make sure people are safe. We got to get people out of there. We got to make sure someone isn't going to be further harmed, hurt, or die. Priority 1. Priority 2 is we got to catch the guy, right? Priority 3 is preserve the evidence. That's just the way it goes. And that should be the way it goes, right? You got to save people first. And then you got to catch the guy second to save more people.
Sorry, folks. Sometimes this is freezing up here, and it'll come right back on, I hope. But she hit it right on the head. That's what we were talking about.
Then you got to make sure if you don't have the guy, you eventually get the guy, and you keep the guy behind bars, preserving the evidence. So with that said, I got a little bit more exclusive reporting I want to give your way. It's important you have that context. And again, this comes from sourcing close to the investigation, that the first responders who responded to.
See, that she keeps talking about. And myself, look, she's a reporter. She's in a different category. But I have a problem with people close to the investigation feeding information to the press. That's not okay. Your opinion, Mike?
Yeah, especially when the person who's giving the information, you know, they have just one little piece of information. And if you think that someone who's even a legitimate, accurate piece of information leaked, and if it's leaked and it's taken out of context for what the little piece is in terms of the whole puzzle, people can start going into conspiracy theories and all kinds of stuff, and they start going down this road, which makes no sense. And you start to go down a road, or go down a rabbit hole, as they say, and you end up so far away from what's actually likely to have happened. Most times, as you and I know, the from point A to point B, it's not always a straight line, but it's what most obvious to us as police, with our experience, think is going to happen or think happened. And when somebody leaks a piece of information, it's not in context. People start to jump and hypothesize, and it doesn't do the public any good at all.
Well, Mike, sometimes in a homicide investigation, in the very beginning, you may not have the direction, the correct direction.
Right.
And it can take different turns. And that's important to realize that. And the other thing, there's different talent levels and different knowledge levels of police personnel that respond to the scene. I remember when I was a patrol cop, I didn't know what the hell the detectives were doing. I was like, oh, why are they doing that? Why did they wrap their hands in paper bags? Why are they doing this? Oh, who's that's flipping the body over? And of course, I would years later, of course, learn all this stuff, in that, crime scene is supposed to take photographs and keep the scene pristine as it was when the crime happened. And they take pictures and all that stuff. Now they use lasers and measurements and all this stuff. And then there's a secondary group of people who are investigators that do the forensic examination of the body. And they're called medical legal investigators, i.e. Barbara Butcher, the famous Barbara Butcher, who was the chief of staff of the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And they have numerous protocols that they take with every body. including the examination of the body on the scene, taking the body's temperature, looking at the eyes, all kinds of things that they do. And they take notes, but they don't touch the bodies till after crime scene is done with the scene.
Yeah, everybody's got their part to play. Everybody's got their standardized protocols. So, and if you follow the standardized protocols that have been followed for years, you're going to get a level of expertise, and that's going to hold up in court, because that's what it's all about, is preserving the evidence, getting it right, because you only have one shot at it. You get it right, you present it in court, because the prosecutor has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt each and every element of the crime. It's very busy. It's not haphazard. It is an absolute, like, as you say, an order. Someone goes first, someone goes second. You got patrol people, you got the detectives, you got the crime scene photographers, you got people from the ME's office. Everybody has their job, but they do it in a particular order because that's the protocol that works.
Absolutely. Fuzzy Doxy, thank you for the $9.99 super chat, and thank you for your appreciation of myself and Mike presenting this information. One of the organizations or the units that definitely destroy the crime scene, but they have every right to, are EMTs. Remember I spoke about, they throw gloves all over the place. They're trying to see if they can save, with this case, they would still have to respond to the scene to pronounce each and every person on the scene dead. That's the job of EMS or EMTs. And then they would say to the detectives, pronounce dead at such and such a time. Right. And that's important, again, for months, years later, if this case goes to court, as this case undoubtedly will. But EMS, they're trying to, as we said, the number one most important thing is the protection of life. And once that is no longer an option because the people are dead, then EMS pronounces those people dead and they get the heck out of there.
1122 King Road, on that horrible overnight morning incident in November 13th. They were not wearing protective footwear, booties, right? Probably normal. If you think about what first responders do, they save lives. Okay. They don't go in to investigate crime scenes. They go in to save lives. And they're in a hurry. And evidence gathering and preservation is not their bailiwick. Just isn't. They save lives. And so when the first responders, according to our sourcing...
I can attest to that. When I would respond to a crime scene, I didn't carry a Tyvek suit with me or booties. I probably should have, because I can tell you that I've walked through some heinous pools of blood and coagulated blood and all kinds of nasty stuff. But then when crime scene, who is a separate unit of the NYPD that's part of the Detective Bureau, they show up, they have all those great tools. They have Tyvek suits and they have booties, and they would insist, Sarge, could you put on this Tyvek suit? And I had no problem. I just didn't have that equipment myself, and believe me, I had no problem putting that on to protect my clothing. Because do I want to bring this stuff home to my family? No, absolutely not. So yeah, I had no problem doing that. But this is what Ashley Benfield's talking about. And she's 100% correct. But absolutely, what she's getting to, can this also be used against us in a court of law? I'm going to let you answer that, Attorney Geary.
Yeah. A defense attorney is going to try to use, again, they have to zealously advocate for their client. They're going to use each and every mistake in protocol that's been made by anyone from the first responding uniformed police officers to the EMTs to everyone. And they'll make hay about that, isn't it true the paramedics went in there without Tyvek suits on? Of course. Isn't it obvious? Because that's what they do. The same thing with the police. I remember in the 4-6, we didn't even have rubber gloves. We'd borrow rubber gloves from the EMTs when we'd see them. Hey, you got a pair of rubber gloves? I used my rubber gloves this morning. I need another pair. And they throw you a couple of pairs of rubber gloves. We didn't even have crime scene tape because we'd run out of crime scene tape. We put
there were so many crime scenes you had no more tape left.
It was terrible because you just think about it. We're putting garbage cans out around the body. We're putting, traffic cones around the body. We're parking our cars up on the sidewalk to block people from walking across the crime scene, because New Yorkers will walk right across the crime scene. They don't care. And just to get the basic gloves. So obviously I'm kneeling down. I'm the patrol sergeant. I'm the patrol officer. I'm there with the EMT. I'm probably there before them. I'm touching the body. I'm looking at the body. I'm looking over it. If it looks like the body's been dead for a while, I'm not going to touch it. But if it looks like the person is still possibly have some sort of life, I'm going to check the neck, see if there's any sort of blood pressure. But yeah, that's, I mean, a defense attorney is going to make hay about it. But I hope that the people on the jury use their common sense and say, well, obviously they're not going to be doing the Tyvek suit thing. You're not going to see uniformed officers running around in Tyvek suits and booties. You can't work like that, on the street. You can't.
Exactly. Rummy, thank you for the $9.99 super chat. Have you ever known there to be a series of murders working in tandem? Thanks so much. In 1990, it was either 90 into 91. New York City had 2,200, almost 2,300 murders.
Crazy.
And most of them, because of the crack wars, were drug related. So many of them were like organized hits, teams of shooters coming from, in a lot of these cases, from the Dominican Republic, because they were fighting over corners in Washington Heights. So there was a hell of a lot of that. I was in the 2-4 that had its own little narcotics war going on. And it's the same type of thing. There were organized shooters that would go out to, they were fighting over corners. So yes, Romy, I hope I answered your question in that way, because most of what we've seen, and, when people talk about, only 60% of the murders are solved every year nationally. Well, 40% of them, they're like, you need cooperation to solve a murder. You really do. So probably 40% of them are the criminal trade killing each other. So they're not going to cooperate in the investigation when it's a criminal killing another criminal. So that's why those cases are so difficult to solve. And look, law enforcement tries as hard as they can to solve those cases, but without cooperation, it is nearly impossible to solve a murder. You really do need cooperation. Pamela, thank you so much for the super sticker, the $2 super sticker. Guys, we appreciate you. Hula Shack, love that. Thank you for the $20 super chat. Thank you both for all you do for us. Thank you. And guys, our channel is growing. Phil Grimaldi comes on as a co-host. He's a retired NYPD detective. Mike, I used to teach with at a college years ago, and I said, let me see what Mike's doing, And I gave him a call, and he took to this like a duck to water. So it's great to have Mike on, and it's good to have other people's opinions. And I find this stuff so interesting. This is a really one hell of an interesting case. It's just like it's unbelievable case, and there's so many things that we can talk about and teach the audience about based on our experience. Lula Morocco, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Thank you for your great inquisitive question. I really appreciate that. Good. I gotta know. Thank you for the $2 super chat. Why not a trial for each death? You know something? There is something called when they sever cases.
Right.
Usually the severing. I'm going to have Mike explain this to you because he's an attorney. He explained it to you much better than me. Want to explain that, Mike?
Yeah, real quick. Yeah, we talked about this the other couple weeks ago because another viewer asked that question. It's a great question because it was, why wouldn't the prosecutor want to have 4 separate trials? Because if Kohberger beats one rap, they still have the ability to try him 3 more times. No one wants that. First of all, you have one crime scene. All right. There's 4 homicides, 1 crime scene. The facts of the scene are all compact, and you'd have 4 trials, and you'd have, other than the homicide, the body, you'd have 4 sets of identical trials, except for just the body. So you're actually trying the person 4 times for almost the exact same crime. The defense doesn't want to do that. They want only the prosecutor to have 1 shot at the apple. The prosecutors don't want that because there's no way that a judge would allow them to do it, and they'd have to prepare for 4 trials, and it's all the same evidence. A judge wouldn't allow that, and state law would not allow that. There's the double jeopardy clause in the Idaho Constitution and in the federal Constitution. There's no possible way that would pass the double jeopardy clause, and so it would be considered 4 separate trials for 99.999%, this exact same offense. It's a great question, and but no, definitely not. Nobody wants that sort of thing. Definitely not.
Mike, I'm so glad I stayed in my lane and I didn't try to explain that, because you did a hell of a much better job than I could have ever done. Jeannie Nash, you did a great job. Jeannie Nash, thanks for the $2 super chat. Daddy Crab, thanks for the $4.99 super chat. As a retired firefighter, it would seem you'd have to treat a crime scene like hazmat, slow and easy with PPE. Daddy Crab, under the best circumstances, you are 100% right. But as Ashley Banfield was talking, you're not gonna not go into a fire because it's dangerous. In the same way that we have to go into a crime scene without proper protection equipment because there could still be someone alive. And we have to help that person who potentially could still be alive. And if the bad guy could still be in there, and we got to go in there and get the bad guy, we can't say, oh, look, Mike and I were all 9/11 first responders. Did we say we're not going to go onto that toxic ground, which all of us got sick from it? I don't know anyone, well, a couple of people, but almost 80-90% of the people that responded to 9/11 have some kind of sickness from it. Some more serious than others. So we didn't question. We took an oath. We raised our right hand, and we promised, to support the Constitution of the state of New York and to support the Constitution of the United States of America. And part of that is to risk our life to save people. And we wouldn't think of not doing that, And so, Daddy Crab, great question. And I'm sure as a firefighter, you've been in those situations too. You guys, this is so really interesting to us and I'm glad, as I said, I stayed in my lane because Mike explained that way better than I could have ever explained it. And let's get back to Ashley Banfield and hear what she has to say.
Got to the house, they encountered a chaotic situation and were unclear as to exactly.
Again, we're having a little, it's the Wi-Fi, it's buffering, I guess you could say. So what she's really talking about, again, is the crime scene and the crime scene, keeping it pristine. Again, and the major point of that, of course, is that, the defense is going to use that.
Who might be still alive,
there we go,
or whether there was a danger still lurking, and they went in fast. And for that reason, they tracked snow melting chemicals in from the driveway and parking lot into the home, and thereby potentially disrupted the retrieval of footprint evidence. So I want to bring in Larry Kublinski, who is a forensic scientist, professor emeritus of forensic science at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and one of the smartest guys I work with on a typical day in this business. Okay, Doc, so this is not uncommon. As sad and frustrating as it feels, this is kind of Tuesday in crime fighting and the processing of a scene, isn't it?
Absolutely. Ashley, you explained it very, very clearly and very well. The first responders are usually
he's right. She did. She really did explain it very well.
Police officers or firefighters or EMTs, and they're trained to save lives, to protect the living, and to make sure that if people need medical help, they get it. They're not trained to do crime scene work. They don't come with the paraphernalia that crime scene people have, like the booties that you described, the head protection, the gloves that they wear, or the Tyvek protective outfits that crime scene people use. So they're not really there to, to do crime scene work. However, the first responder is really supposed to cordon off the scene and protect it from unauthorized entry. This is a big, big problem of people that go into a crime scene because they're police officers.
You know, the professor from John J. Kobolinski, he hit it right on the head. And it's a big problem because in all police departments, there's people of rank, right? So guarding the crime scene is a police officer. Now, this police officer has to tell the chief, you can't go into that crime scene. You think maybe he's a little bit intimidated to tell the chief? You know, even the word "the chief" it gives you that exalted position. You know, he has this exalted thing. Mary Michael, thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat. Hello, Sergeant Bill and Professor Geary. Was just typing. Professor Geary is a great asset to the team due to his legal background, and you beat me to it. Great work. Thank you, Mary Michael. We really appreciate it. So it's very tough. And, you know, I've had crime scenes, homicide crime scenes, where people from other units wanted to come into it. Why do you need to come in here? Where are you from? Gang? The murder victim's 90 years old. I assure you, he's not in a gang, you know, and I turn them away, and, you know, they feel bad because really they wanted to buff out and see the crime scene. But guess what? If you buff out, you're going to contaminate the crime scene, and you're not coming in. Sorry, you know.
Billy, can I tell you just a quick anecdote?
Go ahead. Yeah.
You know, we had this guy that was killed in the park, Van Cortlandt Park. It was a gang rub out, like a mafia rub out. And so my partner and I get the call. We go there. We find the body in the park. We do the cordoning off. The detectives come from the 50 precinct. They come from the borough. And then there's one. And so I'm there. I got my little memo book out, and I'm getting everybody's name. And it's one detective just walks through, picks up the tape, walks through, and starts looking around. I'm like, "Excuse me, detective, what's your name?" He goes, "I'm Chief Ciccatelli." I'm like, "Okay, you're the chief of the Bronx detectives. Okay,
Yeah.
I said, your crime scene chief. Go right ahead, no problem."
But you know something, Mike, he shouldn't really even be walking through there. He really shouldn't. But, you know, as you know, you're not going to tell the chief of Bronx detectives, "Hey, chief, hey, detective, I'm Chief so-and-so," you know, and you're like, "Oh,
not police officer Mike.
Maron, because he's Italian." You said that, right? Let's play a little bit more of Larry Kohberger here.
High-level administrators, you know, they want to see what's going on. They're curious. And the fact of the matter is, the more people you have in the scene, the more likely you're going to have contamination, not just from the first responders, but from.
I said Larry Kohberger. I meant Dr. Larry Kobolinski. I'm sorry. There was you can, what is it called? Word salad?
Yes.
Sorry.
People that work in the police department or people in the press. Everybody wants to know what's going on. So in fact, you limit the number of people that go into a crime scene. You document who goes in, who goes out, and the timing for these events that take place. And the most important thing is that the first responders notify the people that have to be there to do the investigation, the evidence collection team, the detectives, maybe the district attorney. That is really the job of a first responder. Once the evidence collection team comes in, they know how to do it right. Of course, they sometimes are confronted, as you pointed out, with contaminated evidence.
But it's,
you know, Mike, one of the biggest things in the O.J. Simpson case was the contamination of evidence. And I used to think of this all the time because evidence that needs, like biological evidence, needs to go into paper bags. Yeah. Paper bags, right? Not plastic bags, paper bags. So the NYPD back in the day, in its infinite wisdom, they didn't have these paper bags available for the supervisor's car or for the patrol cars. No. You'd go into a bodega and get a paper bag. And I was just like, imagine the defense attorney knew where that paper bag came from. It was El Ranchito Bodega. Oh, really? Is that on the police department's equipment list that you get your paper bags for crime? And I mean, it was lunacy. Right? And you know I'm telling the truth, right? I don't know if the NYPD has addressed that now, but we used to just go grab a paper bag from a bodega. And like crime scene, of course, they have their own paper bags, because if they have to wrap the hands of the deceased in paper bags to preserve DNA evidence underneath the fingernails, they have to have pristine paper bags that are kept in a location where they don't get contaminated, because attorneys could say, Detective so-and-so, where are those paper bags stored? In the trunk of the RMP. And what else do you put in that trunk of the... Boom, they just destroyed the evidence right there.
Yeah. That's a problem, and that's an everyday problem. But that's the reality of confronting, big city crime and homicides in a department like New York City. Smaller departments. I remember a friend of mine who moved from the 3-4 precinct. He moved up to a department in Rockland County. He had an inflatable life raft in his trunk of his car with firefighting equipment and all kinds of stuff. And I said, in a 3-4, because I was in the 4-6 at the time, I said, you open up the trunk, you're lucky if you have a spare tire, and he's got enough for to equip, the D-Day landings in his trunk, because they don't use the equipment. It's just amazing.
Mike, it's funny when we use these copisms or the things we've been trained to say, some folks in the chat are saying, what the hell is a bodega? and I'm like, that's great, because we just say it as a matter of fact.
Right.
Basically, a bodega is a delicatessen, but in the hood, basically almost all bodegas are owned by Hispanic people, and they cater to Hispanic neighborhoods. And we just say it, like we're part of the hood, the bodega. So that's what it is. Magical Mary, thank you so much for the 1999 super chat. Is the $1 million given by ID Gov to investigate the case being used by both prosecutors and defense, since he has a public defender? I think the $1 million, that they probably will need a lot more money to investigate and prosecute this case, goes to the prosecution. Probably the legal aid money comes from another area. It does come from our tax dollars, but I don't think they're going to mesh that money for the prosecution and the defense. I think they come from different areas. Mike, maybe you could speak upon that again. You're probably more knowledgeable than I am about that.
I think the public defender's office has their budget, and they might have, there might be money left over every year. If they're not, they go over budget. But that's going to be a separate allowance from the county, most likely the Latah County. And they're probably, in this kind of case, it's going to blow your budget. This is because they're going to need as much help as they possibly can to put up a war room and to put up a squad of retired detectives to go out and do the investigations. But in the end, it's coming from the public, the taxpayer. It's
100%. Last night we spoke about, and again, Banfield has these sources close to the investigation, and she was talking about how Bryan Kohberger was on the hot seat, basically from September to October, in regards to his TA position, his teaching assistant position, which was connected to his financing for his PhD program, which was connected probably to the financing of the apartment he had in order to live in the vicinity of Washington State University to complete his PhD. Many people, or some people, think that this was the catalyst that may have driven him to commit these murders. A lot of people were saying, oh, but he wasn't officially fired until December. That's true, but his world started to fall apart in September and October. Right. And as we know, the murders occurred on November 13th. Mike, you want to add to that a little bit?
Yeah, I went over the timeline today, and from the time he got there in late August, in classes start right around Labor Day, maybe right after Labor Day. And within less than 4 weeks, he then had to report to Professor Snyder, who was in charge of, who he was working for, TAing for. And Professor Snyder had to speak to him about his behavior. A couple of weeks later, he had to speak to him again about his behavior. And it appears that most of the complaints about his behavior in the classroom had to deal with his very dismissive attitude towards mostly the female students, not so much the male students. He was dismissive of their ideas. At one point, supposedly, he was harassing a female and talking to her outside, and actually as she was walking to her car. So he didn't have much of a honeymoon phase with the students. Within the 4-week mark, they were complaining about him. He had a confrontation with his, what they called a confrontation with his professor. He had another confrontation with the professor a couple of weeks later. The head of the whole entire program put him on like a probationary period where he had to straighten out his act and become more professional. And because not only is he supposed to be teaching like an adjunct, doing the TAing, but he also is supposed to grow and develop in terms of his ability to actually teach and do research. So by the end of October, he was already in hot water, on probation with it was the authorities that be in Washington State. Things were not going well for him. Things were kind of crashing down, and from that point on, where he had that probation plan where they basically told him, straighten your butt out or you're out of here. From that point to the time of the murders is 2 weeks. And within those 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, you can hypothesize that he realized, what was his problems were in his mind were probably related to his inability to connect socially with males and females, but especially with females. And he might have thought that because of the females complaining that, he was going to get kicked out of Washington State, and there would go his dream of being a PhD, criminologist. That's the theory. That's a working theory at this point.
Well, that people are saying they think that could have been the reason his world was falling apart. But look, plenty of people have really huge disappointments and failures in life, and they don't go kill 4 people.
Exactly.
Exactly. Legal Eagle, if found guilty, is it possible for a prohibiting order to be placed on him not to write about his crime in any format? Well, Legal Eagle, in the state of New York, and I don't know if Idaho has it, there's something called the Son of Sam laws.
Yes.
And the Son of Sam laws prohibit any criminal to benefit monetarily from their crime. And if they do write a book or do something of that nature, the money goes to the victims. And that was passed after the Son of Sam murders, which occurred, I believe it was 1977, maybe.
Yes, the summer of 77.
Summer of 77. I was, I graduated high school in 75. So I was about 19 or 20 years old back then. So when some of you people in the chat say, Bill, did you work on that case? No, Teddy Roosevelt was police commissioner, and I wasn't on the job at that point. So that's the Son of Sam laws. But great question.
No, good question.
No one would ever want any killer to benefit by their crime by writing books, and it seems like some of these people become mini celebrities. Let me play a little bit of this with Banfield.
Like losing his job as a teaching assistant at Washington State University. And then with that, losing your funding for the doctoral studies program you're in the school, because it appears right now that that's what happened. We now have sources with direct knowledge of the termination letter that was sent to Bryan Kohberger. And tonight I want to read the letter to you in full. The letter is dated December the 19th, 2022. Starts this way. Mr. Kohberger, I am writing this letter to formally inform you of the termination of your teaching assistantship with the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology effective December 31st, 2022. In keeping with the WSU Graduate Student Handbook, chapters 9G2, remember that, and 12E3, remember that, below is the list of events that led to you being deficient on the following contingency clause of your funding. Quote, maintaining satisfactory progress in fulfilling assistantship service requirements and duties. On September 23rd, 2022, you had an
I'm going to remove that. So basically, his world was falling apart, and he was gonna lose his TA position. He was going to lose the funding for his PhD. And that was connected to his apartment. So the argument is that the event that was the catalyst to these 4 murders. And I would argue that, it very well could be. And I'm not saying it's not, but I would just like to argue that many people have huge disappointments in their life and they don't kill 4 people. So whether this was the catalyst that led him to do this horrific crime, can be argued.
Right. Yeah. He had a third blowout with this professor. He had the 2 early on in the semester. He was put on probation with a plan to improve. He didn't. The homicides occur then in November 13th. December 9th, he has another blowout, a third blowout. He's not a suspect at this point, or maybe, he is. We're not exactly sure what day he became a suspect, but a week and a half after the murders, he has another blowout with with his supervisor, Professor Snyder. And then at the very end of the semester, everybody got together, all the professors, and that's on the 19th is when they formally decided to dismiss him. But yeah, we talked about this earlier a couple of weeks ago, and the motive. We want to know the motive and see if it doesn't make any sort of sense. And we really opined that the motive, if known, if we ever figured out what it was, or he ever actually explained it, would be so trivial to be unsatisfactory. And if this is true, if this working theory is true, as you say, Billy, this is ridiculous, because many people have major disappointments, more so than this, and they don't hurt anybody. They don't kill anybody. You want to punch a wall, you can punch a wall. You carry on with life. But for him, from his perspective, this is yet another rejection. And maybe it was the one, maybe, again, it's totally ridiculous, but maybe it's the one that broke the camel's back. And, he saw his life crashing down. He commits the homicides. And then you have the final act where he gets dismissed. It's not satisfactory. It seems trivial. It seems base. It seems ridiculous. But from his world, the world of Kohberger, looking out from behind his eyes, he might have seen the writing on the wall, realizing his world was over. They were going to dismiss him anyway. And he acted out, and he symbolically, maybe perhaps in a way, killed the people who were not individually, like he didn't know them, but killed the people who were of a class that was responsible for him actually getting terminated, going to be terminated from his position. Not satisfactory, but maybe that's what it is.
Well, Mike, absolutely. If you're unstable psychologically, right, you could need just one thing more to go wrong in your life, and you act out in the way that he did. It seems crazy for us to think that, but someone that is, again, that is walking that thin line of, of having lucid thoughts and crazy thoughts. And, as he said, he sees whites in front of his eyes and that type of stuff. He needed one more thing to go wrong. And this was the one thing. And it wasn't a small thing.
No,
it was a big, big thing. Folks, if you're looking for a great defense attorney in the New York City metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe Murray's a great defense attorney. He's also a huge supporter of police off-the-cuff real crime stories. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer. You can reach Joe on a cell at 718-514-3855 or email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. And he's got a website, jmurray-law.com. Folks, it's amazing how interesting this case is and how fast we're at an hour and 15 minutes, how fast this show has gone. I hope you feel the same way, because that would mean a lot to me that you stayed with us this whole time and the show went fast for you too. But it did go really fast for us. In fact, we didn't even get to cover all we wanted to cover, but I don't want to go much longer because, you guys got to get up for the, well, you don't have to get up, but tomorrow, this is Super Bowl Sunday Eve. You may have to prepare for it. You got to work out in the morning and get ready for the game at 6:30 at night. Anyway, this is fascinating. As new information comes out, the gag order is in regards to getting really vetted information out there has hurt a lot. But in essence, we're still getting information, and we're going to report on it. Rummy, thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat, and thank you for joining us. I'm seeing a lot of new people in the chat, and I'm really thrilled with that, folks. We've just grown to 45,000 subscribers, and our next, of course, we're always trying to move up in this. And when I see new people in the chat, I'm really thrilled. Join the Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories family. And as we do, whenever we cover this case, we have to mention the families and the deceased in this case: Ethan Chapin, Zaina Knodel, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Madison Mogan. And those are the real victims in this case. And we pray for them when we pray for their families. Mike, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Pray for the families. Like you said, they're the true victims in all of this. Well, pray also for the Kohberger family, because the worst is even yet to come for them as a family, and they'll have to deal with Bryan's actions for the rest of their lives. And just be patient and keep your fingers crossed that there will be justice in this case.
100%, Mike. You said that very well. And folks, again, you can come to us. We'll tell you the way it really is. And we're not looking to sensationalize it. We're looking to educate and inform. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Have a great day tomorrow, and God bless.
One episode